Over the course of the last 4 videos in this series, we've covered the story of the Bulgars, starting with their migration from the steppe and victory over the Romans, their successful creation of a new country with the local Slavs, and the continuation of this momentum under Khan Tervel, who defeated both the Romans in 708 and the Arabs in 719. These videos are part of a series on Bulgaria's history, starting from the beginning and going in chronological order, where I focus on historical accuracy based on primary sources and archaeology in both the animation and the artwork. Half of the videos are going on YouTube, while the other half will be on Patreon in alternating order, so check out my Patreon if you want to see the story in its entirety. The goal is to keep this channel permanently ad-free, so check out Patreon if you want to support. The events covered from the period 681 to 718 are extremely eventful in that the pitched battles were so gigantic and impactful that multiple written accounts survived over millennia to give us a fairly clear picture today. Following the peace between Romans and Bulgars in 708 and the victories over the Arabs in 719, along with the end of military activities, came a dry spell in regards to recorded information about Bulgaria. This was due to the Bulgars and Slavs lacking alphabet and writing systems of their own, and Roman scribes not having access to information within Bulgaria due to their rivalry with the Romans. So, with the end of these epic wars, comes an end to our extended view of Bulgaria in this era. The peace did, however, allow the Bulgars to commemorate their epic deeds. Over the last 38 years, not only had the Bulgars completed an entire migration into Bulgaria, but in the 3 aforementioned pitched battles, the 10,000 Bulgar horse warriors had slaughtered close to 100,000 enemy combatants with minimal casualties. Part of the reason I started this series is because I wanted to know how a steppe tribe of 50,000 people was able to dominate continental societies like that of the Eastern Romans. Over the last few videos, we analyzed the how in terms of tactics, but now that these wars have concluded, we can take a look at the how as it relates to statecraft. We'll do this through the vehicle of a very real and physical landmark that the first Bulgars and their allies left, the Madara Rider relief sculpture. This monument was erected on nearby cliffs overlooking Pliska and the rest of the Dobrujan plain. The relief is of a warrior atop his horse, trailed by a dog and slaying a lion. Today the sculpture has suffered from erosion that has erased the color and details of the rider. However, during its time, the rider was decorated with paint and possibly even inlays of bronze and gold. It would have looked stunning in its original state. 2 things are featured here that I already covered in depth in the previous videos. The Bulgar was a master of horse riding and mounted combat, the 2 skills that made them the apex warriors of their era. The nomadic lifestyle associated with these skills, however, had other significant implications. Number 1, nomads in the open steppe had a higher mortality rate, which means the tribes developed a natural racial and ethnic tolerance facilitated by necessity. Allies or replacements of a different ethnic origin could not be rejected by the tribe lest they risk extinction. As a result, the Bulgars themselves were extremely diverse, with members of Asian, Hunnic, Turkic, and Caucasian descent. And consequently, when the Bulgars met the Slavs of the Balkan Mountains, they already had a natural predisposition for cooperation, which ironically enough was once again exacerbated by necessity in the 670s. And number 2, nomadism required heightened logistical planning and foresight, not by a single class or bureaucracy, but by every member of the tribe. Although nomads are communal, the individual was also expected to be self-sufficient and have extensive knowledge of topography, weather patterns, local animal traffic, and practical logistics like maintaining food stores and supplies necessary to continue internal industries. People who were dead weight tended to literally die. As a result, the Bulgars had embraced a holistic brutality that's present in all natural systems, in the same way that the Mongol did in the east or the Comanche did in the west centuries later before dominating their environments. Overall, the Bulgar of the 7th and 8th centuries can be described as a generalist, where sedentary societies like ours and that of the Romans generally require specialists such as the farmer who farms and only farms, the soldier who obeys and only obeys, and the priest who is responsible for handling the people's relationship with God. The Bulgars produced a human who was expected to have mastery of many fields, such as war, hunting, animal husbandry, and all other industries required to keep the tribe self-sufficient. If we exit the historical lens and analyze through a psychological one, human beings who not only face but meet a diverse set of physical and mental obstacles on a daily basis tend to score higher in executive function, critical thinking, and overall ability to achieve goals. Not only this, but these were people who still lived interconnected with nature via their interdependence with the steppe and its animals. The upbringing of a Bulgar youth probably had the similar effect as the agoge had on the youth of Sparta, except in a nomadic context instead of a sedentary one. Overall, considering everything we now know about the Bulgars, we can see that it was almost inevitable for this small tribe to overcome the millions of Romans who opposed them. After the chaotic 38 years of war, conquest, and statecraft came an almost equal stretch of peace and consolidation. The Bulgars had secured for themselves 4 large settlements with inhabitants numbering in the thousands. Ongal, the original fortified encampment the Bulgars used to cross the Danube. Pliska, the new steppe-style fortified encampment that served as capital to the Bulgars and Slavs. Varna, the coastal city formerly known as Odessos that thrived off the Black Sea trade. And Drastar, formerly known as Durustorum, which the Romans used as station on the Danube. In these settlements, Slavic freemen, landholders, and craftsmen lived alongside Bulgar administrators and garrisons. These Slavs, from the description of the contemporary Romans, were very similar to the Bulgars, being pagan animists attuned to nature. They were also similarly hardy and interdependent with the land, self-sufficient in war and peace, and placed a high importance on hospitality. They were just as integral to the union of Bulgaria as the Bulgars were, providing the raw manpower needed to sustain their new nation. These people had overrun the Balkans approximately 2 centuries earlier, and they preferred to live in rural, decentralized communities in the rugged terrain of the Balkans. Although the tribes respected each other's territorial boundaries, they still banded together against external enemies like the Avars and Romans. They produced a light infantry using the typical spear, javelin, axe, and sword in combination with a shield. They were versatile, durable, and notorious for using the terrain to their advantage, whether in ambush or retreat. Around the foundation of Bulgaria, they started wearing more armor, reflecting their own internal style, as well as that of the Romans and the Bulgars. Usually the leaders of these tribes were capable of mounting themselves in a small retinue in battle. In these ways, they were extremely complementary to the Bulgars, making up for their lack of infantry. These cities often even had a population remaining from the days of Rome, whether they identified as Romans, Greeks, or Thracians. Roughly speaking, these people were free to live in Bulgaria as long as they obeyed the law. Aside from the major centers, there were many smaller towns where Bulgars and Slavs cooperated, all of these either starting as Roman cities, Bulgar outposts, or Slavic and Thracian villages. The Slavs in the more distant parts of Bulgaria were slightly more autonomous by virtue of their distance, yet still gradually developing stronger ties with the central authority of the new state. By 719, the Bulgars and Slavs had successfully created and consolidated this novel state. The fortifications in the north were expanded and well kept, and new ones were raised in the south to defend the newly acquired territories in Thrace. The treaty established with the Romans in 716 allowed for the Bulgars to enter the international market of Constantinople for the first time, and victory over the Arabs in 719 allowed the Bulgars to take advantage of this treaty. Although this was a state-sponsored program on both sides, Bulgarians for the first time were exposed to the far corners of Europe, Asia, and Africa via the markets of Constantinople. This would accompany a thematic shift from the several decades of all-out warfare to a new era of diplomacy as well as internal politics.